Okie well, welcome everyone to another edition of our podcast, Founder Wisdom. We have Dale with us today, Dale Dewey. He is the founder of Luxury Solutions and also Founder Solutions, and he has founded various businesses in the past, some of which are in France, Paris, in the luxury field. So it's going to be an interesting interview for sure. Dale, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your entrepreneurial / founders past?
Sure. So briefly, I started my career in consumer products at Colgate-Palmolive in New York.
Yep.
Spent 5 years there. I was recruited into the fragrance business, and I moved to Europe for an extended period of time, working in the fragrance business for Firmenich and Givaudan on the creative side of the business, working with clients like Unilever, Colgate, Elizabeth Arden, L'Oreal, P&G, etc. After about 10 years in Europe doing that, I moved back to the United States and I became an entrepreneur. And I started a series of companies. The first company I started was called Fragrance Solutions. And we were sort of the JD Power of fragrance. we did all the research for the companies. At the time, Unilever was buying a portfolio of fragrance companies like Calvin Klein and Elizabeth Arden, and P&G had bought licenses for Gucci and Hugo Boss and Giorgio Beverly Hills. And these big consumer product companies were extremely interested in having data. And it's an industry that traditionally had no data at all. It was all based on like a fashion sense of just intuition. But as these businesses became very large and some of the brands became $100, $150 million, they desperately wanted data. And so my timing was good. And my first client was Estee Lauder, and the second was Chanel. And before you knew it, pretty much the whole industry was buying our data in our study, which was called Fragrance Track. And after we had a 5-year plan that we accomplished in the first sort of 18 months, and sold the company to the NPD Group, which is a large market research holding. And after that,
I have a question. Sorry to
right.
interrupt here, but basically, I am surprised by the fact that Calvin Klein was are you telling me they started as a fragrance company?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Not at all. Most of the
they started in fashion, right?
Yeah, all of the fashion companies eventually market fragrances. And more often than not, they do that through a license arrangement. So they'll have a beauty company market the fragrances for them. It could be Elizabeth Arden, or it could be Estee Lauder. For example, Estee Lauder markets Joe Malone. Estee Lauder markets Tom Ford, and so on. Calvin Klein was eventually bought by Elizabeth Arden, who was in turn eventually bought by Unilever. And so Unilever was the large consumer products company that owned the license to the Calvin Klein fragrance. So go ahead.
So I have I own the brand, say Hugo Boss, and I want to develop my fragrance. What type of deal happens? Why don't I just hire a chemist or a fragrance expert internally, or do I go see a consulting firm? Then do we do a rev share deal, or do I just pay this company to develop the formula? How does it work?
If you're a fashion company, you're in the business of selling to in your own stores, or to Neiman Marcus or Saks Fifth Avenue or whoever it is, and you're not a consumer products company. You're a fashion company. So the expertise, also the distribution, big companies like Unilever or P&G or Estee Lauder, they have hundreds of salespeople with thousands of points of sale. It's a distribution thing, and it's more convenient. They have the expertise, they have the resources. It's pretty much how it's always done. Not always. A few companies try to do it in-house, but fashion and fragrance are very similar from an image perspective, but very different in terms of how they're marketed.
Yeah, I mean, it's different senses, right? The eyes is the clothes you're wearing, and then the smell that comes with it. That's another sense. So that's super interesting. I also have a follow-up question. How does one execute a 5-year plan in 18 months without dying?
Well, just that it became more successful more rapidly than anticipated. So I can't remember, it's been a while, what the exact business plan was, but it might have been like, we're going to get 6 or 8 clients the first year, and another 6 or 8 the next year, and then another 6 or 8 the third year, and grow to 25 or 30 major companies as our clients for this research. And we pretty much got them all in the first 18 months.
That's crazy. And well, congrats on selling the company to NPD Group. That brought you to Catherine's Fine Accessories, right?
Yes, yeah, that was another business that I bought simultaneously.
Okay.
I had an idea to create a fragrance specialty business. So
Okay.
kind of like what Bath and Body Works is to toiletries, shampoos, and bath foam, shower gels, I wanted to do for fragrances. That eventually is like somewhat similar to what L'Occitane has become, or some of the
Okay.
other types. It was I was kind of ahead of the curve there. I also wanted to do custom fragrances, which eventually did come into vogue. But as it turns out, this business that I went to see this location in Greenwich, Connecticut, to open the first store. But the real estate person who was showing me the space had it wrong. It wasn't the space which was for lease. It was the business which was for sale. And the business was this fashion accessories business. And so I had decided that it was interesting. So I bought the business with my own money and with a loan from the SBA.
Okay.
And it was a fashion accessories business in Greenwich. Greenwich is a very wealthy community. The main street, which is Greenwich Avenue, had a lot of traditional stores on it, like, for example, barbershops and restaurants, shoe stores and stuff like that, but didn't really have luxury. And I really felt like it was going to become a big luxury, sort of like the Rodeo Drive of the East. It's not quite the Rodeo Drive of the East, but there's a lot of luxury business, like Tiffany opened there, and Saks Fifth Avenue opened there, and Bottega opened there. We sold a lot of Kate Spade at the very early days. And before or just after I started my third company, which we'll get to in a minute, which is e-commerce business, I decided I had too much on my plate, so I decided I wanted to sell it. So I called up Andy Spade, Kate Spade's husband, and said, you should buy my store. And he said, why? And I said, well, this is where all your customers live. And he said, I agree. And so he bought it. And that was the store that's there in Greenwich, which was my store, was the second Kate Spade store in the world. The only other one was one in Soho at the time.
Okay.
So then after I sold Fragrance Solutions, I wanted to take advantage of the internet, the e-commerce that was just starting.
Yep.
And I started a company called Jasmine.com. And it was all to be a lot of contextual marketing. We had museums online. We did a partnership with Procter & Gamble, which was one of my former clients from Fragrance Solutions. And we had an exclusive deal with them to market Hugo Boss fragrances online. We had a marketing partnership with Procter & Gamble. They invested $12 million in marketing. We raised $5 million in venture capital. We had a joint venture with Ulta Cosmetics, the big retailer, to do our back end and inventory. And, that all worked extremely well, but that was sort of Internet 1.0. They're talking about Internet 3.0 now. Internet 1.0, hardly anyone had a computer at home. Almost nobody had internet connections. If they did, it was just simply a dial-up connection. So we were just too far ahead of the curve. So we sold ourselves to a company called Ashford.com, which was a luxury portal backed by Sequoia and Benchmark, as well as Austin Ventures. It had been taken public by Goldman Sachs, and it was also an investment from Bernard Arnault. So it was a pretty big deal at the time. But everything blew up in the spring of 2000, the famous .com meltdown.
Yeah, that's a good domain, by the way. I don't think that's the one that.
Right.
I
Well,
don't think you own that anymore.
No, there's a very funny story behind that.
Okay.
After we sold it,
Yeah.
they weren't using our domain anymore. They were pointing our domain for our traffic. But Ashford got sold 2 or 3 times, and someone civilly allowed the domain of jasmine.com to expire.
Okay.
And I was on a business trip in Palm Beach one day, and I'm reading the USA Today, and in the front page in the lower left-hand corner where they have those statistics, it said top 3 URLs sold in whatever year it was. And the first one was sex.com, $12 million, and the next one was something else. And the third one was jasmine.com, $1 million. $1 million sold for $1 million. I bought it for $9.95.
Wow.
And we had a very sensuous ad campaign. The word jasmine is a sensuous word. We chose jasmine because it was a short name. It's also a flower that fragrance is used often in fragrances. So it was a great name, but it's very hard to find good URLs, and the shorter the better. And this sex company bought it, and it's now the largest sex company online, from what I understand.
Really?
I was giving a presentation to the French American Chamber of Commerce several years ago in Houston, and they said, "Well, we've been reading your bio and see that you used to be the CEO of Jet.com. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?" So I had to tell basically the story I just told you. It's a pretty funny joke, but it's actually true.
Yeah, I mean, what a coincidence. And yet, like, I guess in '98 is a good domain to buy. Today would probably be worth like 2, 3, 4, 5 million, that type of domain. So kind of interesting. And that brought you to Christoffle, or Christoffle, as English people would say.
Christophe, yeah. So I had done some consulting work for a luxury catalog business in New York, and a woman who was the founder knew the principals in Christophe. It's still a family-owned company dating to 1830. They were looking for a CEO, and I spoke French and had lived in Europe for a long time, and obviously was also American, and it was a good fit for them, and they hired me as their CEO, and I did that for not too long, actually, but I learned a lot. It was a very interesting experience. And after that, I was asked to be CEO of Fauchon, the French gourmet food company. So those 2 experiences really gave me a lot of luxury good experiences.
And 1 year only at Christophe, like what happened? Like did you had like your whole thing after a year? Was the CEO thing not like your ideal job? Like what happened? Why only 1 year?
Well, in a nutshell, I just didn't really get along too well with the
management.
They had a very different philosophy than I did, or I had a very different philosophy than they did. There was some disagreements and misunderstandings, so I decided to leave.
I have a question regarding that. Like one of my first early childhood experience listening to my entrepreneurial dad, he traveled to Paris various times. He was in marketing in textile field. And he told me that French people were very bad at doing business. They got very emotional at the negotiating table and all that. How different is the culture? Let's say the North American culture. Canada and US is somewhat similar vs the European way of doing things. Is it that different? And have you found it a pattern, like a problematic pattern?
Well, I lived and worked in France for quite a number of years in a French
Mhm.
company. I also worked in Geneva, Switzerland, in a French-speaking company.
Yeah.
I also worked in London, and that's an English-speaking country, obviously, but it's
Mhm.
also, well, until recently, until they Brexited, it's part of Europe,
Yeah.
and more of a European mentality than American. You know, when you're an American working in Paris
Mhm.
for the first time, you can't understand why they do things the way they do. It
Okay.
doesn't seem to be efficient or
Mhm.
make sense. Um, when you're an American who's lived in Europe for a number of years and you come back to the United States, you can't understand why Americans do things the way they do. So the answer is that things are different, you know, things are, but things have changed.
Mhm.
The French, for example, who I know the best in Europe, they were always behind the curve. You know, they were, if we got computers in the early 90s, they'd get
Mhm.
computers in the late 90s. If we got
Mhm.
online in the late 90s, they get online in the early 2000s. They were always
Mhm.
sort of 5 years behind us.
Okay.
They didn't speak English very well.
Yep.
But that's all changed. They're
Okay.
very advanced. They're very much in line. Certainly, in the luxury goods businesses
Mhm.
that I worked in, you know, they lead the world. They dominate.
Yep.
They are the quintessential leaders. So
Mhm.
there can be no reproach. Although, um, you know, the European approach is just different. It's a very different culture and different lifestyle. It doesn't make it worse. It doesn't necessarily make it better either. There's things that are much better, and there's some things that are less good. It just takes use. It takes time to get used to, and it's to try to find the best compromise or the best of both worlds.
Yeah, different cultures, and like you said, I think some were kind of slow to adopt new technology, especially in retail, um, and luxury good. I mean, maybe, but luxury sometimes is synonym with like latest tech and all that. For example, yesterday I was looking at the comparison, the new Rolls Royce vs the Maybach, and the Rolls Royce is still very much old school, but the Maybach is like very high tech, everything inside, and some prefer the Maybach to the Rolls Royce, which is more authentic, traditional. More on that later. So tell us about like Fauchon, which brings us to that company, which looks like it's still active today as well.
Yeah, so for sure, that's quite a story as well. When I was asked by the primary investor who had recently taken control of Fauchon to help him turn around the U.S. market. There had been a previous CEO who had been very ambitious in trying to expand into New York, who overexpand overexpanded much too rapidly, and you know, created a lot of financial stress. And then they had also bought another. They bought Flow Prestige, which is another a gourmet food catering company in Paris, and they just got stretched too thin. Um, and you know, Fauchon's been around for a long time. You know, it is the school of pastry chefs in the world. The finest pastry chefs in the world have come out of Fauchon.
Mhm.
It's an incredible company and culture. They've recently, in the last year or so, run into very great financial difficulties because of COVID, because all their stores and everything were shut down. And I know that they're in some degree of financial difficulties, but they've been
Mhm.
around since I think it's 1886.
Mhm.
It still has a great following. They're just the quintessential, you know, they're the quintessential gourmet food company in a country which is the quintessential source of gourmet food. So it's quite a company and quite a brand.
Yeah, and I must ask, like you started your career 84. I mean, you were the owner of some of your companies. I mean, you look very successful. 10 years later, you were CEO of Christophe, then Fauchon. How was life back then? Like, I mean, you must have. got like a very nice salary. Like, how's life? I need to ask. And probably you've made lots of money in your life. Lots of kids are base their life goals on how much money they make. And how was life back then? And tell me, what's your philosophy on wealth, money, and what's a life that's well lived?
Well, I wrote a book called
Yeah,
The Man in the
I
White
saw that.
Pickup Truck, which I would recommend to your listeners. It's a guide to retirement by 35. And I can tell a brief story about that. Yeah, there you see it there on screen.
Yeah.
I was hitchhiking. This was when I was in college from Denver back to Michigan, where I grew up.
Yeah.
And I got picked up by a man in the white pickup truck. And he were very early in the morning, and I'd probably been out having some adult beverages the night before.
Mhm.
And he says to me, "So what are you going to do in life?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to." At the time, I'm interested in going into the Foreign Service. And he goes, "Oh,
Mhm.
very interesting. Yes, I've got some friends in the Foreign Service."
Mhm.
And then he said, and then after that, I said, "Well, I'd like to go into international business." He goes, "Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's kind of what I do." And then I thought to myself, this guy is not just your average guy driving a white pickup truck. He's obviously some, internationally involved guy. And I started asking him, I said, "Well, what is it that you do?" And he says, "Well, I go places where they don't have things, and I go at other places where they have those things, and I put those two people together." I said, "Well, what is that?" I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, so for example, in Russia, this is 1981 or two, it's the height of the Cold War.
Mhm.
Russia doesn't have hair dryers." And I'm like, doesn't have hair dryers? What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, no, they can't get hair dryers in Russia for the most part." I said, "Oh, okay. So what do you do?" He goes, "Well, I go find places that make hair dryers, and then I put the two together." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy's doing these deals behind the Iron Curtain. This is amazing." And he says, "Yeah, well, it is." I said, "Yeah, it's been a good life, except that, all I've done is work. I mean, all I do is work. I had to give up two possibilities of getting married. I hardly have any friends. I've got no social life.
Mhm.
It's just hasn't been that great."
Mhm.
But my father had worked for some company from the time he was 22 to the time he was 65. He retired, got the proverbial gold watch, and 2 years later died of a heart attack.
Mm.
And said, when that happened, I just said to myself, I don't want to live my life that way. I think I'll just work my ass off until I'm 35, and then I'll retire and I'll never work again.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, that sounds like a good plan.
Mhm.
That sounds good. And he looks at me and he says, and I'm 34, and next year I'm going to retire, and I'm never going to work another day in my life. I'm like, wow. And he goes, "Okay, I got to drop you off here now. I'm exiting."
With that brick of a knowledge, like that bomb, Boom.
Yeah, and that just resonated with me all this time, and for years. And I started having I don't know how much money he had to retire for the rest of his life. I have no idea. We didn't discuss that. But I came up with this theory several years later that if you had $1 million and you owned your own house, you could retire for the rest of your life. And if you make 10% return on $1 million, that's $100,000, and $100,000 salary can give you a pretty darn good life, right?
Yep.
Especially if you own your own house, which means you have no mortgage or no rent.
Mm.
And about 10 years ago, I arrived in California, and I had some time on my hands, and I said, I'm going to write this book. And I wrote the book. And this is kind of part of the FIRE movement, if you've heard of.
Nope.
Financial Independence, Retire
Oh,
Early.
yeah, I've heard it on Reddit.
And I was kind of ahead of the curve on that idea. I didn't invent that. I didn't call it that. But that's essentially what this book's about. And the book is kind of, the first part is describing what the definition of retirement is. I speak to a lot of people your age, and they'll say, "Well, I don't want to retire. I like to work. What would I do?"
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't want to, you don't have to stop working. The definition, you have to read the first chapter. The definition of retirement is that you don't have to work. Okay. you have to work. If you don't have enough money to pay for your rent and your food and your utilities and whatnot, then you have to work, right? So I mean, you're obligated to work. If you have enough money that you don't have to work, you could continue to work because you choose to.
Yeah.
And the day that someone, something or some job is something you don't like, you can just walk out.
Yep.
Because you have the means and you have the financial means to be independent. So
Okay.
yeah, that's the whole idea of the book. I had always meant to, get behind it and market it, but I just got so busy with so many different projects over the years that I'd love to, go on a speaking tour or speak to young people. Half the book is a sort of a theory and philosophy. This goes back to your question. What's the definition of a good life? For me, the definition of good life is living lots of different places and experiencing lots of things in life and enjoying life. Your family and your friends. Money is a part of that equation. You have to have a certain amount of money to live comfortably, but you don't have to have millions and millions and millions, in my opinion, to live comfortably.
Oh no, like definitely not. I'm in Mexico, and I can tell you that like at let's say 30K a year, here you're a millionaire. You can have everything. I live a very good life, and I don't consider myself rich. Well, I mean financially, but I'm rich first from so many other perspectives, time, energy, like the Tony Robbins definition, do anything with anyone at any time, something like that. Well, I'm kind of the definition of that. So, well, that's cool. I have so many follow-up questions. First, I thought that you were the man in the white pickup. I was like, okay, like luxury, and he lives in a pickup, or something. I mean that was my first thought. Maybe because I'm searching right now, like for a truck that I will convert in a van, let's say in some kind of camper van. They call it van life, to travel a lot. With like everything that's happening with COVID, I think it's one of the best ways to travel and be in nature. Very, very nice definition that you put up. Then you mentioned like 1 million, 10%. Well, I think to get the 10%, you need to be kind of good at knowing where to invest your money. Would you manage your own investments, or would you outsource it to some kind of financial advisor?
Well, the simplest answer to that is you can invest in the S&P 500 index fund. One good one is IVV. That's the symbol. It's from Vanguard. It's a 500 S&P 500. It mimics the S&P 500. Right now we're going through a lot of turbulence in the markets, but over the last 100 years or so, the average return of the stock market is about 10 or 11%. Sometimes it drops down to 9, sometimes it goes up to 12, but it's been about 10% on average for, you can Google it, average return of the S&P 500, historic average or something like that, and you'll get that. So that first of all, you only pay capital gains taxes on that. You don't pay income taxes, so you would only pay 15%. So you would net $85,000. That would give you $7,000 a month. Now, if it was a terrible year in the stock market and it went down 10%, okay, well, it depends on how much you need to live on. But if you needed, say, I don't know, $4,000 a month, that would be $50,000 for a year. You would have to steal $50,000 from your principal. So if the first year you had $1 million and it went up by 10%, you'd have 1.1 million. If you spent 50,000, you'd have $1,050,000. If the next year it went down by 10%, it would be down to 950-ish. And you'd have to steal money from your principal. You have to take 50, you'd be down to 900. But the next year it might go up 20%. Over time, and if you're retiring at 35, you do have a very long-term horizon. You can live to 100, say. So that's 65 years of investments, right? So it can go on for a really long time. And over time, the averages will come back to that, right?
I need to talk to you about your diet if you plan to live to 100 and your daily routine. Like, are you serious with this 100? Because I plan to live like 150 and I'm serious about it. I'm a huge on biohacking. Like, do you have Is that a serious plan for your 100?
It's been a serious plan for a very long time.
Okay.
So
you look good, by the way. You must take care of yourself like in a pretty good way. Like, do you work out? Do you
I was skiing
diet?
yesterday.
Skiing is epic, but yeah, like to live 100, not the best sport.
Well, it depends if you don't fall.
Judging on what happened to Schumacher and
Well,
all
that's
of
true.
these, yeah. I mean,
But that was a freak accident what happened to Schumacher. Well, so I had a guy who I work with, and I also talk about this in my book, and also have a new book that I'm working on called
Okay.
Life by the Dozen.
Okay. Do you have a landing page on that one?
No, it hasn't. I haven't. I'm just in it. It's just at the very beginning. I could
Okay.
send you a copy of the prologue if you're interested.
Yes, I am. And what is it about?
So Life by the Dozen. So about 12 years ago, because I'm about to turn 60,
Yeah.
I was playing golf with a couple of buddies back in Michigan. And at the end of the game, one of my friends said, "It's not bad for a couple of 50-year-olds." I said, "Well, I'm not 50. I'm 48. I don't want to be 50 yet." He goes,
Yeah.
"Well, whatever. It's more or less the same thing." And I thought, yeah, I guess he's right. It's more or less the same thing. And I'm driving away. I said, 48. Oh, I'm 48, 48. I said, "No, it's 4 dozen." And I said, "Yeah, I'm 4 dozen years old." And I was just having a silly conversation with myself.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why do people make such a big deal of like the big 3-0, the big 4-0, the big 5-0, whatever? What's the big? Why not count by the 12s, by the dozens?
Uh-huh.
And I started thinking, it's like, does that make any sense? I said, well, 0 to 12, you're a kid.
Yeah.
Right? No one would argue with that.
Mhm.
13 to 24, you're an adolescent. Technically, I wouldn't say teenager, but you're an adolescent. And it's true, in real life, your brain is still developing until you're 25.
Yeah. Rough waters, I'd say.
So that makes sense. For example, you got out of college at 22. At 23, if it's a Tuesday night, one of your buddies says, "Let's go down to the bar and have a couple of beers," you say, "Yeah, let's go." Right? But if you're 33, you say, "No, I got work to do tomorrow." Right? You get more serious about things. So 25 to 36 is sort of like the first stage of career, maybe get married, maybe start to have kids. 37 to 48 is, the heart of your career and raising your family. 49 to 60 is, getting toward the end of your career, becoming an empty nester. And then 61 to 72 is sort of like the transition between career and retirement. And then 73 to 84 is like the beginning of older age. 85 to 96 is old age for sure. And then 97 to 100, if you go over, is like, you're into your golden years of like an extended life,
Yep.
There's a guy who I recommend this book to you, Living to 100 by Thomas Pearls. Okay. He wrote this book and he described how you can live to 100. And it's based on 3,500 interviews with centenarians in New England, people who have lived to 100. And he came up with this acronym, AGEING, AGEING. Yeah, that book. It's a really good book. He said, these are the factors that help you live to 100. Based on statistical research that was done with Harvard, I think, and Boston University. It's a very serious medical study. A is, hang on a second, AGE.
Aging acronym, Tom Pearls.
Oh, hang on.
Let's Google that.
I'm having a blank here. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
A is attitude. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's a good
having
one.
Having a positive attitude is not just a concept. It's statistically found in research that people with positive attitudes live longer. It's obvious. It's just truism. Okay. G is the only thing you really don't control is genetics. Okay. If you have family with good genetics that have long living genes, you're going to live longer on average than people who have bad genetics, right? E is exercise. It goes without saying. A lot of these things are just sort of like, of course, right? If you exercise, that's going to be better for living a long life, right? I is very interesting. Intellectual stimulation. Curiosity. It's not just that. So the best examples of intellectual
crosswords like puzzles.
That could be part of it, but the best example is learning a foreign language
Okay.
or
Yeah.
learning to play a musical instrument, because it forces
Okay.
your brain to use a different part of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So it enhances the synapses in your brain.
Mm.
So it literally stimulates it's like brain exercise.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Good
Okay.
one.
And you see that with people who retire and then just do nothing except become couch potatoes. They kind of
Mhm.
lose it. Whereas
Yeah.
people are like really active mentally and physically. They're like all together and on it. Yesterday, I skied with a guy who was 70 years old. He skied just as fast as I did. And I ski really fast. And he's like the
Nice.
#1 ranked guy nationally in NASCAR.
Wow.
So, it can be done.
I want to be like that.
Yeah, AGEI, I said. N
Yeah.
is nutrition.
Yep.
Eating
Nutrition.
good nutrition. The biggest thing about nutrition is to stay away from red meat. That doesn't mean you can't eat any of it. Just don't eat lots of it.
Okay.
Eat the right types of oils. Olive oil and not some of the bad oils. And
Yeah.
just common sense. There's a lot of
Yeah.
good diets out there, but just if you eat properly, that's important, right?
Mm-mm.
AGE
And a J.
G. So he said, I don't have a good G. So G is get away from the bad shit. Okay. And the
Or
number one,
genetics again.
no, it's not. It's not. The #1 bad shit is smoking.
Yeah.
Statistically, for people who smoke like a pack a day, they will live 15 years longer,
Yeah.
less, 15 years less. Now, there's smokers who say, well, my grandpa lived at 102 and he smoked a pack a day for 80 years.
Genetics.
Possible.
G genetics.
Yeah. But on average, that's the worst thing.
Yeah. I'd say stress is even worse than smoking. I'd say and that comes in with the A attitude. I call it mindset, people that stress all the time and that lets a lot of toxic shit come out of their mouth, these people just don't get it. Every time they do, they reduce, let's say a week or two of their lifespan. But yeah, that's very cool. And talking about exercise, do you exercise daily? And what does your typical diet look like?
Well, I haven't been doing such a good job recently on exercise. We moved here to New Hampshire and we've been fixing the house. I mean, my exercise has been more like fixing, painting, moving stuff around. And in the summer, I do a lot of swimming. Swimming, I think, is probably the best exercise you can possibly do.
Yeah, it's very meditative as well. I'm reading the Atlas of Art by Brené Brown, and she mentioned that it's a form of meditation. And I agree, as an Ironman, I spent lots of time in the pool and just swimming and looking at this black line, and it's very meditative. I mean, it's quiet. I thought at one point of buying an audio thing that I would go and listen to podcasts. I have this obsession with always learning, but sometimes it's good to chill as well. And swimming's very good for that.
Did you do the Ironman?
Yeah. I did various Ironman.
Did you do the one in Kona?
Kona, no. It's on my list. I also have the Vermont one on my list, which is near where you are. I might do the Mont Tremblant one as well in Quebec. You've probably been there as a skier. Yeah, I have it on my bucket. I did the Los Cabos one, which was kind of nice, and I did the Cozumel one, which was even nicer. The most one of the clearest water in the world. You could see the fishes while you were swimming.
Beautiful, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a very nice place.
One of my clients was Mark Sisson, who wrote the Primal Blueprint.
This guy's a beast.
Primal
Blueprint. I know Mike Sisson. Primal Blueprint. So what did you coach him? What kind of service was it?
Well, he was my client. I helped him, with the strategy of his business and helped him pivot from, he was selling a lot of supplements. And when I spoke to him, I said, Mark, if I follow the Primal Blueprint, why would I need to take supplements? And he said, well, you really wouldn't have to. If you follow his diet and his approach to living. And
I kind of agree with that, like I started, I had my own supplement startup. It was a brain optimization supplement. And I started it because I used to take 50 supplements a day when I started, biohacking big time. I was like, yeah, let's make one pill with all of these things. And yeah, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need that, but I mean, you would need to eat all of the colors of the rainbow. Me on my side, I have problems digesting vegetables and salads, for example. So it's kind of hard to have the perfect diet and include all of your macronutrients in one plate, right?
Yeah, well, he was a marathon runner. He was the first alternate to the U.S. Olympics. He was an Ironman athlete in Kona. He was the head of the anti-doping commission, I think, for triathlons.
Interesting.
He's a fascinating guy, very successful, but he was constantly in pain. And he said, "Why is this? What is wrong?" I mean, it's like, I'm one of the finest tuned athletes in the world, and I constantly have these aches and pains and problems and issues.
Yep.
And he spent a lifetime, or at least 20 or 30 years or more, studying every type of diet and whatnot. And he came up with this. That picture of him, he's like 70.
He's ripped.
He's like 70. He's like 70.
He is ripped.
He's 60. Yeah, I think he's close to 70. Yeah. And he sort of took on this whole thing. He created this whole Mark's Daily Apple, which became very successful blog. And then he had Primal Blueprint site, and then he started Primal Nutrition. He sold it for $200 million to Kraft Heinz. So he's a highly successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's such a great deal. Laird Hamilton, I mean, that's another very fit person. He's 57.
I met Laird Hamilton in Malibu with Mark.
Okay. I mean, he has some kick-ass trainings in the pool, and yeah, he's definitely one of my top guys. The fear thing is always on my mind. I restarted sparring recently, boxing, and and I restarted it because last year I was like, hey, I don't have fears anymore, but that's not true. If you dig, you always find fears, fighting another human, for example. And another one of my fears is surfing. I mean, I almost drowned like 2 or 3 years ago in Huatulco, Mexico. The waves weren't that big, but they were probably, 3-4 meters. And I got freaked out, man, in the water, and was like, shit, am I going to die today? I got like rolled by a wave, and it took me like 5 seconds to go up as the waves were so big. But yeah, those things are super interesting. And these guys, they're kind of cool. Although the supplement business, I'm not sure if you, you probably checked the economics of it. It's not too attractive. Yeah, like sure, for the cashing out and selling for 200 million, that's cool. But running
that was based on the foods, not based on the supplements.
Okay, yeah, but these business. Well, I mean, you're retail guy. I tried this business. Obviously, I'm younger and I'm more like internet type of person, but I wasn't that pleased with the like e-commerce side of things and getting into stores and all of that. And it's one reason why I dropped that business, that supplement business. Well, would you agree that these businesses are a bit more challenging than, say, a fully online service-based business like yours or mine right now with TopLeads, for example? What are the difference between these two business? And my experience was that it was harder to the day-to-day in that business, stay in the green, like I like to say, make it a profit on a daily basis while investing in ads and all that. VS a service-based business, which you're almost always profitable, and it is scalable, but a bit less. So any comments on that?
Well, there was, when I first, there was retail, and then there was e-commerce or e-tail. And then a few years later, they talked about bricks and clicks, they kind of had to have both. And now they talk about direct to consumer, or they talk about omni-channel. And, honestly, they're consumer businesses. There's two types of business. There's business to business and business to consumers, B2B or B2C. If you're selling to other businesses, then your list of customers might be 100 or 200. And if you're selling to consumers, it could be millions of consumers, right? So
Yeah.
how are you going to get to those consumers? Well, obviously, the most efficient way is online, either through your own website or Amazon or whatnot. But, consumers don't only buy online for certain things. If they want to try on shoes, they want to go into a shoe store. If they want to touch and feel what a sweater feels like, people just like to shop, just like, if eating food was only about eating food, there would be no need for restaurants. You go to restaurants not just for the food, you go to the restaurants for the atmosphere, for the music, for the people, omni-channel. I think that a lot of companies are getting as much as 50% online, but 50% still through stores. So, some do as much as 70% online. Some are natively digital. They're 100% online. And is that good? Well, the cost of selling online is not as cheap as it used to be.
Yeah.
Fulfillment costs are very expensive. It just depends. That's the reason why Amazon does so well, because they can send you a box of something that has 12 different things in it. If you got to ship a box with just one bottle of your supplement or one sweater or whatever it is, you've got to pay for the whole box, the whole fulfillment, the whole, so those are the things that drive it. But at least right now, the smart thing in a consumer business is to do both. Now, it depends on the business, but I'm definitely very pro digital. I was in it early.
Yeah.
I'm a business is a business. However, it's kind of like a hierarchy of exposure. So if you have some stores, then every store is like a big advertisement for you, right? For your business, right?
Yeah.
And people might walk by it, or they might walk in it, and then they might go home and order it online, but they might not have ordered it online if they didn't walk by it or walk in it and touch and feel the stuff. So,
True.
The combination makes sense.
Yeah, putting your eggs in various baskets. COVID makes things uncertain. Like there's waves, and it's on and off. That's a bit less cool. Facebook ads costs have probably double or triple. Amazon, you cannot do organic stuff anymore. You need to pay for Amazon PPC. I think it's still worth it if you calculate the ROI of it. My point is more like the cost of making the product. For example, I built my own formula, for that supplement, and that ate up like probably 60-70% of margins upfront. Then shipping. I also think there's various types of business. There's lifestyle business. So obviously that was a lifestyle for me. I still take my own supplement up to this day, and it's a thing I'm passionate about. But the cash side of thing is always bigger than the passion. I think, it will extinguish the passion if you don't see any cash coming from it, because last time I checked, we still live in a capitalist society. So I'm just wondering, I think one day I will restart a physical brand and, be an e-commerce, something like that, probably when, I have other pockets of money that are generated by other of my businesses. But I'm just wondering, if it's possible to be highly profitable. There's, for example, Bulletproof by Dave Asprey. That's a huge one. Are they profitable, or will this guy like sell out to Kraft for 1 billion in 2 years, and that's his exit strategy? But I mean, we've got like 6 minutes left theoretically, and I've took like way more of your time, but obviously a super interesting person, like lots of advice to offer. Want to finish up with you telling us about Founder Solutions and Luxury Solutions, and maybe like tell us a bit like quickly about Interstate and Install, so that the timeline is full here.
Well, there's no point in talking too much about Interstate and Install. Interstate was a wireless retailer startup in Austin, Texas, that I was asked by some private equity friends to come and turn around, which I did. Okay. Install product was a mass market fragrance company with similar situation and needed some it needed to be restructured. So I did that for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. Yeah. In terms of Founder Solutions and Luxury Luxury Solutions is a consultancy. I've worked with a lot of luxury companies on usually project-based things, very specific thing for 3 months or 6 months, sometimes longer, something that needs to be addressed, okay? But founder solutions is sort of, founder solutions and luxury solutions are basically the same thing, except that founder solutions work specifically with founders, okay? It's helping founders to get to where they need to go. So you'll see in this list of clients there, you'll see some are startups and some are big luxury goods companies. They're all the two websites are essentially the same. I've worked on a lot of different companies, but founder
And what's
solutions,
the other website? Is it like founder-solutions.com?
yeah, and luxury-solutions.com and founder-solutions.com.
Okay, got it. All right. Okay, and I mean, okay, so look,
founder solution, it's like,
yeah.
so, you know, it's like a luxury company could be a hundreds of millions of dollar, billion-dollar company, and I'm working with division, or they need some market research done, or there's a specific project they want help with. Founder solution is more like helping the founder with the whole company, whether it be, you know, restructuring or figure out growth or raising money or a new strategy, to help the company or help the company exit. So I'm a founder. I've been a founder. I like working with founders. I can cut through the BS. You know, it's like, founders are pretty wary of people who are big time consultants. I don't consider myself a consultant. I mean, but I can't say I'm not. You know, it's just I'm someone who helps people based on my own experience, right?
Okay.
So I know what it's like to be a founder, so I know how they like to be treated, and I try to be helpful.
So if I want to work with you, what are the costs? You take equity? Like, what's the deal?
It's a combination of things. Typically, I do what I call a business audit.
Yeah.
The business audit is sort of, you know, as short as 1 week to as long as 3 months. I try to interview most all of the executives in the company, and it depends. If it's a small company, that might be 3 people, and if it's a bigger company, it might be 25 people. Most recent project I did, I even interviewed a bunch of factory workers to try to assess the business. And I always say, I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to evaluate and recommend solutions to whatever the problems might be. I always tell founders, I'm here to make you rich, you know, help you become rich, you know. And then once I do the analysis, that might be all they want. They might just say, thank you very much. Thanks for those that analysis and those insights. We appreciate that, and we got it from here, you know. Or they might say, well, typically they would hire me to help them with their strategy. But I don't do the strategy up front. I do the analysis up front. I need to understand the business, okay? But I can do it pretty rapidly. And then I work with them. Then I work side by side with them to develop the strategy. And then the third phase of the process would be, do you want help executing the strategy?
Okay.
And if they want help executing the strategy, that could be another few months. And then after that, they might want me to be on the board. Compensation could be either just fees or a combination of fees and equity.
Do you have partners to help you execute that strategy, or do you execute it by yourself mostly?
Mostly I execute it by myself. Usually I have one or two clients at a time.
Okay. Well, your experience is pretty striking. So I would definitely understand, you know, like for the need to hire you as a consultant, as per se. And yeah, your personality is how do you say, more flexible, I think, than like typical consultant. So yeah, that's super interesting, and I'd understand why founder would go your way. Last question. If I understand well, nowadays you segment your days between writing books, skiing when you can, consulting, and is that, well, I'm trying to phrase that in a proper way, but what are your goals for 2022? Do you live like your ideal life, and what's your plan for the next 10 years?
Okay, that's a good question. That's quite a question.
Yeah.
Well, so before I would do these consulting projects with the objective of getting involved for long term. So they would hire me to do something, and then usually they would hire me to do some more, and then before I knew it, I'd be like the CEO or the chief marketing officer or chief operating officer, and then I'd be part of the company. Okay, and so this process was with either working with a private equity company or working with the founders, a way to get involved in something, because I decided I didn't want to do any more startups. Okay, I did several startups, and they're very hard, they're very long, there's no guarantees, and I didn't want to do startups anymore, even though I love startups and I don't mind working with startups. I just didn't want to start from scratch. So this was my way of being involved in early stage or privately oriented companies. I never wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to be an operator, someone who was helping to run the business. Then recently, when I moved here from California, I realized that some of these projects were becoming, people, I could have 2 or 3 of these projects, and it could be a sort of a business in and of itself. I could be involved in a lot of different things, which is interesting to me because I get bored with just one thing. I like to do lots of different things. One of my clients now is a luxury furniture company. I never worked in the furniture business before. The other one was a sock company. So I've done
pretty
a lot
badass socks.
If you look at my clients, I've done a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
And it's been very interesting because of that. So I enjoy that. And also it's sustainable because it could involve equity. It could involve, being on a board, or it is kind of an ideal situation for me, and I do like that. Looking
at it from a third person, it looks like you have a nice life, So that part, then the book, then the skiing, for example. I mean, that's a life well lived.
Well, when part of this, the man in the white pickup truck philosophy.
Yeah.
Retirement by the age of 35. I didn't make that up. He was the man in the white pickup truck. He's the one who said it's 35. I didn't choose 35. It wasn't a magic number for me, per se. I actually said I wanted to get to the age of 40 and have no regrets in life. I wanted to live overseas. I wanted to learn other languages. I wanted to do lots of things. I wanted to start my own business. And by the time I got to 40, I had done all those things.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic. And then it was kind of like, now what, it's not always a perfect world, but I think that, I have a lot of friends who have a lot of money and continue to work. And I'm like, why, why continue to work so hard? And a lot of people get married to their career. Like the career is the most important part of their life. I want the most important part of my life is to enjoy my life. Career is part of that, but not the only thing.
Yeah, is it like an addiction? Is it like, hey, if I give up my work, who will I be? Is it an identity thing? Is it like a children that inside you that fears that if you don't have that in your life, like something big will be missing? That's the question.
I think it's a slave to habit. If you wake up every single day at 6:30 and then you take a shower, brush your teeth and get dressed and you go off to work and you do that until whatever time, and then you come home and you have dinner and you just do that, and you've been doing it for 40 years, and you're all of a sudden whatever age, and someone says, well, you got plenty of money, why don't you retire? I said, well, what am I going to do? This is my life. This is what I do. And I'm like,
exactly. It's a comfort zone, right? It's the danger of staying in that zone that us humans, I think we're naturally attracted to. I think it's important to constantly reinvent yourself and be in some kind of R&D position in your own company and in your world, right? Me and my company, not sure if you know the Gino Wickman traction chart in a company, but there's the visionary in there, there's the executor. Me, I always love being in the visionary seat, right? In which I'm in charge of R&D and coming up with new stuff and making sure that it's implemented, so that I constantly get out of my comfort zone, and so that I don't fall in that trap, I think life would be kind of sad, if I would. And I can feel it daily, like it's tough. Sometimes you always get in the same routine, and you're like, hey, is it progressing? And life becomes very boring sometimes when there's too much of habits. So it's a fine equilibrium, because most people that start, they don't have these habits, they don't have the discipline. So first, like, get those habits and those disciplines, and like every rule in the book, once you master them, then you need to rewrite them, right?
Well, reinventing myself has been something I've done many, many times over.
Yeah,
And
obviously, yeah.
it's partly failure is not an option.
Yeah.
And also part of it is it's interesting. Once you reinvent yourself once, it's easier to do it again. And people, boring is easy, and comfortable, but it's also boring.
Yeah.
Trying something new all the time, different, is hard and challenging and frustrating and stressful, and it's not always easy. But
Yeah.
it is interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's about equilibrium, not the boring sense of equilibrium, but just, the right dose of something, and being in the gray, sometimes darker gray, sometimes lighter gray. But yeah, interesting conversation. I feel like we could talk for like 20 years, Dale. You have so much knowledge and interesting experiences to share. But yeah, like we'll shut it down for today. Thank you so much for your time here. You've been very generous with your time, and don't forget to send me the sample of your book. I'm also writing something. I've gone in a 10-day silent meditation not so long ago, and took around probably 50 pages of notes. And each of these notes is like a point, right? So I segment my book with like one note, and I write one paragraph to make it more digestible. So I'm entering the author game too. I'm gonna send you an excerpt if I feel that you can like get something out of it, because for now it's really broad and it's weird, but it's very interesting insights nonetheless. So yeah, thank you for coming on. It's been amazing.
My
I think
pleasure.
this conversation will be yeah, I think our listeners will enjoy the conversation a lot, and I'll send you the recording as soon as we're done editing. Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much, Charles. Enjoy.
All right, man. Have a great day. Talk soon. Bye.